Well, hello everyone. My name is Jacob Tipantasig-Wolverton. I'm the Director of Music and Discipleship here at Union Chapel, Indianapolis. I'm here with Pastor Elizabeth, the senior pastor here, and we are so excited to unwrap and share with you the message that we just heard from this past Sunday. Pastor Elizabeth, welcome, and it's so good to be here with you today. The series title, it was what? What did we come up with for that?
Love like Jesus.
And what does that kind of entail? What inspired that idea of let's love like Jesus?
Well, Valentine's Day fell on a Sunday this year. And I had been waiting years for that to happen. Had great plans for the local congregation to do Valentine's Day on a Sunday. Well, COVID scuttled a lot of those plans, but it did get me thinking about the different kinds of love. Love on Valentine's Day is a very particular kind of romantic relational love. How is that different than what we talk about in the church and in our relationship with Jesus? And that just got me digging just deeper and deeper through some of the stories of Jesus to learn what Jesus identifies as love, which is something very different than what we celebrate on Valentine's Day.
Absolutely. You know, I think about not long ago, my husband and I took a class. I think you and Mike taught that class, 5 Love Languages, and really unwrapping what are your ways that you receive or give love, right?
Right.
What were some? I remember Luis is he wants quality time together.
Okay.
And that looks different, as I've discovered, for each person.
Sure.
What does quality time mean to that person? So yeah, as you think about those 5 love languages. And how does that relate to Jesus? Does that relate to Jesus? Does that relate to our personal walk and relationship with God? What do you think?
I think it probably has some connections. Love doesn't look the same for everyone. And especially as we seek to love like Jesus and we encounter people with different needs, different perspectives, different understandings, our love expressions are going to have to be different and tailored to that person.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to recall back to those languages, right?
Yeah. Quality time you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Words of affirmation, which is my husband's.
Yep, that's mine.
Okay. Acts of service, which is mine.
Okay.
Change a light bulb for me, and I am feeling loved. Gifts, and there's one more.
Did we get the touch? So
no,
hugs.
Physical touch.
Physical touch.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So as we think about loving like Jesus, Jesus obviously per se is not physically here where we can touch and those things. So it's interesting to kind of think about how do we experience God's love? How do we experience Jesus's love? Mm-hmm. Is it, I think about frequently I'm in a worship service and I'm just so moved by God's presence in that room that I'm a crier. So I start crying. So if you ever see me crying during the middle of worship, just know, oh, God's doing something. He's really moving or something in Jacob's life. Who knows? And, maybe I got something in my eye. I don't know. Well, really the series unfolds out of John chapter 13. Yes. Verse 34 and 35. Let's read that real quick. You want to take 34?
Okay.
And this is really talking about Jesus predicts Peter's denial, right?
Right. And Jesus says, in the context of speaking with his disciples near the end of his life, these are some of the last things Jesus is talking with and teaching his disciples. He says, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. And then
it goes on in 35, by this all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. That's a lot of love right up in there, isn't there?
That's a lot of love.
But let's think about that. That's the Bible I'm looking at. That's red letter right there.
Yeah,
right?
Red letter, words of Jesus.
Words of Jesus, straight from I give you a new commandment. So let's just unpack this verse right here. I give you a new commandment that you love one another. How have we... these series that we're doing, it's really helping people with their faith formation, their discipleship, because it goes on to talk about showing these forms of love. That's how people will know you're a disciple of Jesus, right? If you have love flowing out of you. So if we look at that first part of it, I give you a new commandment that kind of leads us to understand that there were other commandments.
There were.
We know those, the 10 Commandments.
The 10 Commandments.
Right.
Right. And we talked about this a little in the message this last weekend. I think what this is referencing here, the Old Commandment, is all of the Torah, the sacred text of the Jewish people, that was their guide to live by. That's how they understood God's instruction to them and how they were to interact. And that was based on love. It's not that love is new. Love is not new. But here when Jesus says, I give you a new commandment, he's saying your model is something different now. Your guideline is something different. Your instruction and example is something different. And it's Jesus. Mm-hmm. We're loving according to Jesus now. And so, yeah, it's helpful to look at the scriptures and dive into those and see what they say. But our model for faith living and loving is Jesus.
Absolutely.
Sounds simple when you say it that way, but it's not. It's not easy at all.
And really, when we look at, we reference even scriptures further back from the 13th chapter of John. If we go back to John chapter 3, verse 16, we all know that verse, right? John, 3:16. God so loved the world. Stop right there. What did God do that showed so much love? Well, he gave us a gift. He sent his only son for each and every one of us. That's a huge sacrificial type of love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when I think about, a new commandment I give to you, love one another, is God kind of asking us to have some type of sacrificial love? And as we're in the season of Lent, you and I were talking earlier about what is Lent. Do you want to unpack that just a little bit? I was so excited to hear Lent and what does Lent mean?
Lent, right. Lent is this time before Easter. We count it as the 40 days before Easter, but if you look at a calendar, you can't just count a straight 40 days, and it's very confusing to those of us that want things to add up. It's the 40 days prior to Easter, not including Sundays. Because Sundays are always celebrated as a little Easter. We always celebrate Jesus' power over death. So we began Lent today. And in the early church, it was a time for preparing for baptism. It was a time that if you had been separated from the faith community for whatever reason, it was a time for you to repent, to amend that relationship, and to return to the faith community. So that Easter was this celebration of new life all over the place. Certainly Jesus coming to life over death, but new believers coming to the faith, and believers who had been separated from the faith returning to that and having newness there. So all that came together on Easter in the early church, and we've landed on a much more structured time of Lent, but still the purpose is to examine our hearts and our relationships with Jesus so that we can arrive at Easter with a sense of newness in our relationship with Jesus.
Yeah, sacrificing something, giving up something is a lot of people do that. They give up maybe television. They don't give up video cast or podcasts, No, not when we're trying to do something new here, right? But what is something that you give up? What do you sacrifice? And I think through this new command I give you, love one another, that sacrificial love, that's that idea that Jesus came as a sacrifice for us. That's a lot of love. And as we're in the season of Lent, how can we think about ways that we can be loving to our neighbor, loving to those in our community, loving one another? But it's a sacrificial love. It's hard work.
It's hard work.
It's hard work when you're sitting there and maybe you're disgruntled with your spouse. Let's just bring it all the way back home.
Yeah.
And you still got to love at the end of the day. It's hard work when you're not getting along with a coworker, and there's conflict there, and you got to work through the conflict and figure things out. How do we continue to do what Christ is asking us? Gosh, you still want me to love? You still want me to push through that?
Mm-hmm. This story, this passage that we read, Jesus is at the table with his disciples, and he already knows who at that table is going to betray him and turn him over to the authorities, and he's talking to them and loving them and washing their feet. Yeah, that's not an easy love.
No.
That's an intentional love that we have to decide to do, even if we don't feel like it.
Yeah, I could just get this picture of Jesus sitting there just kind of eating his supper, just talking, not really somewhat making eye contact, but just kind of being like, new commandment I got for you guys around here. You're going to love one another. I know one of you are going to, you're gonna rat me out here pretty soon, but I'm going to love you. You know, he still had to love.
Yeah, and he did.
And that's amazing. And that verse continues on, just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, and this is the really, really cool part, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. Mm-hmm. That's a big word, disciple. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, we think about who were the disciples in the Bible that went on to be apostles. We definitely know about them.
Right.
Did it stop there? I don't think it does stop there. It continues on, and a disciple is what? What in your mind is a disciple?
Anyone who is a follower of Jesus and a student of Jesus' way. It's one thing to say you believe in Jesus, but to be a disciple is to study Jesus' ways, follow after Jesus' ways, live into that. It's kind of the next step after you say you believe.
Yeah, I like that. I always like about what are the next steps that we can take in our walk. Now, the series, I'm just going to read down through. This is how we've introduced the series. You don't have to look very far or very long to see that the world can be a harsh place. Hatred, division, bad behavior, and violence are all around every turn. Yet Christ still asks us to love. Mm-hmm. So I'm interjecting a few words here. The news gives us a steady diet of chaos and conflict. A lot of times we don't even know which news channel to turn on and figure out what is going on in the world. What's truth and what's not truth. I can tell you this much. We always find truth here, right? Yeah. So popular TV shows and movies bring the worst of it right into our homes. It is so pervasive that we despair at being able to overcome any of it with either our words or our actions. I was in class the other day, and we're talking about vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And we listened to this podcast by Brené Brown. Mm-hmm. Excellent podcast. And she was really unpacking the word vulnerability. And really a discovery that vulnerability is really the key. It's the key to unlocking relationships. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as we're talking about love, you have to be vulnerable to a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. I know one of my weaknesses, my areas of growth, we all have them. Mm-hmm. My area of growth is being vulnerable, right? It's not very easy for me to do that.
It's not easy for anybody.
Right. You build up all of these walls around you, you protect yourself. And then Brené went on to talk about parenting. And how as parents, I call it the helicopter parent.
Okay.
You know, the one that hovers over the child, making sure they're safe at all times. But it takes a little bit of vulnerability to kind of step back and go, okay, there's going to be things that hurt them. There's going to be chaos that they experience. How do we keep loving them? And what we learned about was that we can be a source of encouragement. You know, when they come home and Sally made fun of them or whatever happened at school or they got gum stuck in their hair. I can remember this story, and my sister's not going to like me, I'm sorry. She was riding the school bus home and some kid behind her threw gum and got it in her hair. But, you know, my parents so lovingly just worked with her. I think the peanut butter was the trick to get it out.
Yeah, they say that works. Yeah.
But it just was, you know, how she felt bad. She felt, you know, really, really, really sad. But what is the job to kind of come along and encourage? So as we think about the scripture, the passage about talking about love, I don't know that it's all necessarily, and we talked about this earlier, that we're not always romantically talking about that in this love sense. So what are some practical steps? Even in parenting, you know, you encourage, you lift up. What are some practical ways that we can share love with our colleagues, our friends, our community?
Right. Well, Megan Sharp on staff here, she shared with us this last Sunday one way to do it right where you are. And in studying one of the stories that we talked about last Sunday, the story from Matthew, where Jesus heals the centurion's servant, the Roman officer's servant. That story starts out by saying Jesus was in Capernaum. Why does it matter that Jesus was in Capernaum when he did this? Not a hotbed for Jewish or Roman tensions. It was just a city on the north of the Sea of Galilee. And it occurred to me through some study that if Jesus was in Capernaum serving and meeting needs, he was not somewhere else, right? He was serving right where he was, fully present, fully engaged in whatever the need was right there. And so this last Sunday, Megan Sharp encouraged us to, right where you are, wherever home is for you, find some ways to serve others. Maybe that's through some of the little free pantries, making sure those in your community are stocked well, or helping a neighbor, or finding a charity nearby that you can help with. But God has you planted right there in that community. Do something there to show Jesus' love. That's one way. And often it is just as simple as a kind word. How seldom do people get a kind word and an encouraging word in their day? Judging by the interactions we all have with people, I think some people never get one. They just carry so much anger and hurt with them that a kind word can just speak volumes.
Yeah. You think about those 5 love languages, right? How can you use one of those that we talked about? And if you missed them, go back and listen. But how can we use one of those to kind of be a source of encouragement? Obviously, during COVID, we don't want to go around hugging people. But just be aware of that. But think about those things. How can we be showing love? How can we? I think about, in my upbringing, I grew up Southern Baptist and then Pentecostal, and a little sidestep of not really talking about love, but really talking about evangelism. You know, it was the idea that we would go around all over the place and we'd have a tract in our back pocket ready to share the gospel message and share with them the salvation message and take them down the Romans road and that sort of thing. As I've been growing more and more, obviously far removed from that, maybe not for you all realizing that, but I've been away from that movement for a long time. But I've been unpacking the idea of the Missio Dei, the mission of God. Right? And what is the mission of God? It's the mission of the church as well. And it's unpacked right here in John for us, to love.
Right.
That's it. That's it, folks. I think so many times we try to make it more complicated than it really has to be.
Right. Right.
It's so simple. It is so simple just to be love. The other day, somebody was sharing with me, because we were talking about how do we help people that are in need. Right. And they came up with a practical idea. They said, why don't you just take a small little baggie and you can put food in there, whether it's granola bars or an apple, whatever it might be, probably non-perishable items that you can put in your baggie. Just keep it in your vehicle, so those moments that you pull up to a stoplight, right, and you see somebody that's marginalized or in need of something, you can reach out there and you can be a blessing to that person.
Right.
Right there is being love.
It is. Yeah, it's often no more difficult than responding to the person right there with you. You don't have to go far to look for opportunities to love people.
Yeah. Now, the series kind of goes on and it says, but the world that Jesus came into was just as broken as ours is today. And he came with the strategy for overcoming the hate, hurt, and dysfunction. Now, Jesus' plan was love. That's it. And he left that plan for his followers to carry on. Loving like Jesus is not easy, but it is pretty simple. It's pretty simple. We're currently studying Simple Church,
right?
Which is just being so simplistic in how we approach church. It doesn't have to be complex. And as we look back at the ministry of Jesus, it was simple. It wasn't complex, and your words even say that here. Jesus' plan was love. Now, you went on to say, and he left that plan for his followers to carry on. Loving like Jesus And we just need to look to Jesus himself for our example. Jesus, as Jesus has loved us. We are called to love others. And by this, the world will be healed. I love that last part that you wrote in there. Loving as Jesus loved. By this, the world will be healed. Tell me a little bit about what drove that, what inspired that.
As I looked at the stories of Jesus in the Gospels, when he had personal interactions with people, people always left that interaction more whole than when they began it. Whether that was a physical healing or a spiritual healing or a relational healing, they never left Jesus without having some broken part in them healed and having them be a step closer to a whole and healthy person. And that grew out of Jesus's love.
Yeah.
Love never hurts. Love only helps. And if you find your love not healing and helping, you might look at what you thought you were doing that was loving. Because I don't find Jesus ever doing anything that hurts another. Yeah. His love never hurts or tears down.
Yeah. Our theologies, our beliefs, our practices, are they life-giving? And the model of Jesus was all about that. Was all about life-giving. And you'd reference all the stories of Jesus. I think one of the biggest ones that I recall is the woman with the issue of blood.
Right.
And she was in the streets, and all she did was touch the hem of his garment. Mm-hmm. And of course, the streets were crowded with people. I've been in a crowded airport before. Mm-hmm. People bumping all over you. I wouldn't have felt somebody touch the hem of my garment, to be honest.
Yeah.
But he stopped. Jesus stopped right there.
Yeah.
And what caused him to stop? The simple words, it says, virtue flowed from him. Mm-hmm. Just from her touching the hem of his garment. I'm getting chills thinking about that.
Yeah.
And that was really about virtue, love. Mm-hmm. Right? So time and time again, we see through the scriptures, healings, miracles, all of those things were wrapped up into one simple thing. Love.
Love. Yeah.
Now, I have your notes.
Okay.
So I see a lot of plans and where you're heading with the whole series. And I know you've talked about this theologian. We've talked about this theologian a lot. I love some of the models that we've talked about from him. But Soren Kierkegaard.
Right.
Kierkegaard.
Yes.
You pick which way. I think it's Kierkegaard.
Yeah. Depends on what part of the world you're from.
Now, Kierkegaard was a theologian, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Kierkegaard states that you quoted was, love is the works of love. Mm-hmm. How does that speak to you?
Yeah, that I found to be such a powerful statement. Love is the works of love. It's never enough to say, I love you, and not have something that shows that. I think of, my husband and I could tell him I love you all day long, but if I never acted like it, my words would be empty. And so love always shows itself in action. And I think that's what Kierkegaard means here, that when you love, you show that in actions. And ultimately that is what lends weight, authenticity, credibility to your words of love. And honestly, that's where the church, I think, has fallen down so often. We've said God loves the world and we love you, but we haven't followed it with our actions. And that's on us. And so that's where we have to do better as the church. But our love has to make a difference in the lives of others, or it's not real love. It's just empty.
Yeah. Since I've known you and your husband Mike, I know that has been a central piece of your ministry, your lives, is just loving people unconditionally. So thank you for continuing that and modeling that to the church. It's a true inspiration. Okay. But as we think about, love in action, we can't just go through the emotions, the actions, so to say, of doing church.
Right.
Right. We can't just, right now we're on an online platform for worship, right? We can't just hit play, listen, and then do nothing with what we hear.
Yeah.
I think that how do we look for the good in all things that happen? So we're in the middle of a pandemic. Where's the good? Where is God working? Where is God moving? And I think of my own self, and I think about how can I make sure that when I come out of this, that I have more action to the love. How do I take what I hear on Sunday mornings and then move through the week with that?
Yeah.
How do we do that? That's tough.
And especially during pandemic, it's tough. We can't necessarily engage folks in the usual ways. That doesn't mean there aren't lots and lots of ways we can still help. It might just have to be something different. And again, look who's nearby and what need they have. There's a church down the street from me in Plainfield that twice a week they're receiving food for local pantries. How easy is that? I go by that church every day. How easy to drop off some food and bless somebody that way. We say to love like Jesus is simple, but it's not easy. The other side of that coin is it's a lot easier than carrying all the baggage and hate and hurt that is the other, right? It's easier to just love and give and serve that person in front of you. So we got to be creative during the pandemic, but we can still do it.
Yeah. There
are still many, many needs and lots of ways we can.
And being simple about it, right? It doesn't have to be complex.
No.
Like what I talked about, the Missio Dei, the mission of God. Love does not have to be complex. The 5 love languages, I thought about one of the things that you all taught us was that those that experience gifts, having gifts given to them as a source of love, it's not the lavishing gifts. It's really not. It can be a simple thing. I was at the grocery store and I saw your favorite candy bar. Yeah. Here you go.
Yep.
I love you. It's so simple.
It's so simple.
And we can apply that not just to our romantic partners' lives. We can apply that at work.
Absolutely.
Pay attention. Pay attention to your coworkers.
Yeah.
What are they drinking? What coffee are they drinking, or cream do they put in their coffee? Or if you didn't know, we like coffee around here.
Just a little.
or maybe you notice that they regularly have a snack that they enjoy. Those are small things that maybe you can do. So I think outside the box. I love that simplicity.
Yeah.
Now, when you love, and I believe you wrote this in here, when you love, it shows itself through action. Love always leads you to do something. That last part, love always leads you to do something. It's that action piece, right? To do something requires action. Now, we this past Sunday, you talked and preached out of the book of Matthew.
I did.
Chapter 5. And share with us a little bit about the scripture and the passage that you used.
Yeah. It's the story of Jesus healing a Roman centurion's servant. This Roman official comes to Jesus and says, my servant is in pain, paralyzed, in distress. And he really doesn't even ask Jesus to do anything. He just says, I have this need. And Jesus says, right off, I'll take care of it. And I found that just really, really interesting in that we know that this Roman official was different from Jesus in every way. He didn't share his faith, didn't share his ethnic background. They had almost no experiences in common. And yet he recognizes Jesus might be able to do something for him, so he comes to Jesus. And Jesus just, out of love, heals the servant. Doesn't expect anything in return. He doesn't say, well, yeah, I'll heal your servant if you start coming to church with me. None of that. No, he just heals the servant. Steps across all these boundaries and differences to provide care. How simple is that, really? How simple is that? we try to make it much more difficult in putting conditions on, in being uncomfortable around
You
some
got to dress
differences.
the right way.
Yeah, yeah.
All those things.
Yeah, all those things.
Yeah.
No, just meet the needs that's there in front of you. And you mentioned being vulnerable.
Mhm.
How much vulnerability did it take on both their parts to have this interaction? Jesus put his life at risk to interact with a Roman centurion who could have, for any reason, waved his hand and done away with Jesus. And the Roman is risking reputation and all sorts of social reaction by being seen talking to this Jewish rabbi. But they both just laid that down, had this interaction. Jesus provided love and healing, and in the end, everyone is blessed. Everyone is blessed. Probably including the people that were around and saw this exchange. I think it's an amazing story.
That is, yeah. Again, another example of love.
Yeah.
Virtue flowing.
Mm-hmm.
Another example where Jesus was using love to bring healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of, as we wrap this time up together, I think about as we're in the time of the pandemic, and how can we continue to be disciples? How can we put action to the love that we've experienced?
Mm-hmm.
We close worship, or we close the time of offering because God gives, we give. Thank you. Because God gave us love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How can we turn that back to others and put that into actions? So what a great sermon series that we're unpacking here. Any last final thoughts that you want to share?
Well, thank you for engaging in this series, in this conversation today. I just encourage you to try something. Everybody has different concerns and comfort levels. We're not asking you to come onto the streets of Indianapolis and serve those who are experiencing homelessness, go across the seas to a mission field. Just right where you are, take a step. One step out of your comfort zone to provide love and encouragement to someone else, and see how that blesses you and them and what God does with that. And maybe the next day it's a couple steps. And if you put the effort forth, God will meet you there, bless you, and bless your efforts.
Such a good word. I love that. One step forward. Just one simple step forward. Well, friends, as you go from this place, I love this. I'm going to be using this frequently. Go with the confidence in knowing that our first love surrounds you. I hope that this word, this experience today has been a source of encouragement. Like and share this across your social media so that we can start to help others grow in their faith walk, in their discipleship with God. God bless you. Thanks so much for joining.